The Nancy Drew Files got a new cover artist named Cliff Miller, starting with book 92. Cliff will stick around until book 111. Sorry, I forgot to mention that in my previous review.
Argo Font Book Review, Argo Font Book Review.
Nancy and friends are working at the Help Is Here hotline at the local teen center. Teenagers call in anonymously and talk about their problems. It's sort of like the hint hotline from the Nancy Drew games, only with fewer puzzle solutions and more complaints like, "My boyfriend is so annoying." As we know, boyfriends don't last long in this series. Bess's most recent boyfriend, Kyle, is finally getting the boot. He's moving to California. Bess is sad she'll never see him again. Tony Ramirez, the hotline coordinator, assures Bess that she can get tons of dates with him. "Tony, maybe you should wait for Bess to finish the breakup before you ask her out." Nancy gets a call from a distraught girl who says, "14th, tracks!" Nancy goes to the train tracks near 14th Street. She finds the girl's bracelet near a dead body. The police officer who investigates the murder is B.D. Hawkins from book 71. His hair is still long, but he doesn't have a mullet anymore. That's good news. The murder victim is Paul Remmer. The mystery caller is his girlfriend, Rachel Thackett. The group goes to Rachel's apartment, only to find the culprit broke in and ransack the place. Rachel's roommate, Billy, mistakes them for intruders and attacks Bess. This inspires Bess to take self-defense classes. I expected Bess's new fighting skills to come in handy at the end of the book, but they don't. The main suspect is Kip DeFranco. He's the leader of a local gang called the Nighthawks. Kip was almost sent to prison thanks to Paul. Billy's shocked to hear Kip's a suspect. She says Kip can't be the murderer, then runs away crying. Mr. A runs the teen center. He lets Paul live on the 3rd floor, which is being remodeled. Suspicious footprints and scrape marks lead Nancy to find an envelope with $5,000 cash hidden behind a removable brick. I bet Paul got the idea for that hiding place from Boxcar Children number 3, The Yellow House Mystery. Rachel's wealthy mother is Helen Thackett. She has an unhealthy obsession with Rachel. She alternates between bragging about Rachel and trying to control Rachel's life. Ironically, Rachel's school picked her as most likely to succeed, not most likely to run away from home and witness the murder of her boyfriend. Billy says the day before the murder, Mrs. Thackett came to the apartment. When Rachel refused to come home, they got into a huge fight. Mrs. Thackett threatened to kill Paul and disinherit Rachel. Billy says she was with Kip at the time of the murder. Nancy double-checks at Billy's work, which disproves this alibi. Nancy and George confront Billy over her lies. Billy confesses Kip doesn't have an alibi. She arranges for Nancy to meet with Kip. As you might expect, it's dangerous to meet with a gang leader. Nancy is violently captured and thrown into a boxcar where she's surrounded by gang members. Kip claims he's innocent. He wanted Paul run out of town, not killed. One gang member saw a silver Mercedes fleeing the crime scene. Nancy and her friends confirm that car belongs to Mrs. Thackett. Rachel calls with new information. Before he died, Paul gave her an envelope with important evidence for the police. Rachel promises to hide the envelope in a specific spot at 10. When Nancy gets the envelope, the masked culprit arrives with a knife. He's scared away when Bess screams loudly. Good to know Bess's self-defense classes paid off. The envelope contains a page from an account ledger along with a $1,000 check. Since there is no context for either of these items, they are extremely unhelpful. Seriously, Paul should have written an explanation for the evidence, instead of assuming the police would magically know whose ledger it is. Then again, most checks do have names on them. I wonder why this one doesn't. Nancy realizes the culprit bugged the phone lines. She finds his tape recorder in the basement. The culprit appears in person. Nancy should catch him red-handed here, but instead she hides behind some boxes and does nothing as the culprit leaves with the incriminating evidence. That was a dumb move on her part. Nancy tries to understand the accounting ledger. She reaches the incorrect conclusion that Paul was double-crossed by a partner in crime. Meanwhile, Hawkins and the police narrow in on Mrs. Thackett. They prove her alibi is false, and she tried to pay off Paul to keep him away from her daughter. Nancy calls the woman who wrote the check. The woman says she sends a monthly donation to the teen center. She never gets receipts, making it very easy for the culprit to steal the money. Hawkins agrees with Nancy, somebody's stealing $10,000 from the teen center every month. But Hawkins says that's totally irrelevant. That's a job for the fraud unit, not a homicide detective. I can't believe how stupid Hawkins is. Paul said, "Give this envelope to the police if something bad happens to me." And then he was killed. But Hawkins is like, "No, that's totally irrelevant evidence." Ugh. The police find Rachel in a hotel. She confesses she saw her mother at the crime scene. Nancy sets a trap for the culprit by having Rachel call the hotline. The culprit, who is spying on all the phone calls, will undoubtedly hear the message and come for Rachel. When Mrs. Thackett falls into the trap, she's immediately arrested. Nancy hangs back to get Rachel's stuff. That's when the real culprit smashes through the window. The culprit is Mr. A, who's been embezzling funds for a long time now. Paul tried to give Mr. A a chance to retire in shame, which proved to be Paul's fatal mistake. Nancy and Mr. A fight for control over a knife. The struggle ends when Hawkins returns. Mr. A is arrested, and Tony takes his job as teen center manager. Rachel becomes a Hotline volunteer, and the Nighthawks give Nancy an honorary jacket. The end. Postbook follow-up. I like this book. I especially like the shorter investigation scenes, where Nancy breaks Billy's alibi and learns what car Mrs. Thackett drives. The scene with the gang was good too. The second half of the book isn't bad, but nothing stood out as much as those scenes I just mentioned. Hawkins made for a good cop partner. I can't say I liked seeing him return for a second book, because I honestly forgot all about him. I noticed the author likes having characters cross their arms and glare. That happened 6 times. The culprit might be the weakest part of the book. Mr. A has to be guilty. He's the only one in a position to embezzle from the teen center. And like I said in my last review, this series has recently been enamored with surprise culprits who are considered too nice to be a suspect. Plus, there's sort of a giveaway scene where he goes on an angry rant against teenagers. Why would he be running a teen center if he hates teens? I give Nancy Drew Files number 93, Hotline to Danger, a 9 out of 10.